us here on RT International. This news just in. Evacuation of people from the Syrian city of Aleppo has now been halted after rebels broke the terms of the truce struck with the government. That is according to our correspondent on the ground, Lizzie Phelan, who I believe is now joining us over the phone. Lizzie, Rory here in Moscow. We understand the mass humanitarian evac has been paused. What's the situation on the ground now? What can you tell us?
Hi there, Rory. I've just spoken to a senior general in Aleppo who said that for now the deal is off, and that's because the deal was supposed to see Syrian army prisoners, pro-government forces detained by the rebels evacuated before the last group of rebels and their families could leave Aleppo. But he told us that they violated this, that they weren't allowing those detainees to be evacuated. He said they've also tried to bring out heavy weapons with them instead of the light weapons that they're allowed to bring out under the deal. We've also heard some clashes this morning. So for now, the deal is off, and he said that if those detainees are not evacuated, then military operations against that last rebel pocket in East Aleppo will resume. Other pro-government media are saying that, in fact, some of those detainees were already smuggled out last night, and the rebels managed to also smuggle out with them some heavy weapons. We have no official confirmation of that. So right now we're waiting at the Salahuddin crossing to see what's going to happen. Of course, over the last 24 hours, there have been thousands of people, rebels, their families and other civilians, injured people evacuated from that last rebel pocket in East Aleppo. The Russian Center for Reconciliation saying that at least 6,000 of those people were evacuated this morning. There was more people coming out, not all of them in those green buses, some in their own cars, and they're being escorted by Russian military personnel and the Red Cross to the western outskirts of Aleppo, where those in green buses can change cars and be taken onto the rebel stronghold of Idlib, which is already packed with militants and their families that have surrendered under previous deals in Syria with the Syrian government. Others we hear will be able to travel on to Turkey. Yesterday, the Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said that Turkey would allow people who have left Aleppo into Turkey. Other reports saying that some of those rebels that have left Aleppo will be used as part of Turkey's Operation Euphrates Shield against both ISIS and Kurdish forces in Syria. So right now we're just waiting to see if this evacuation will continue or if military operations in Aleppo are once again going to resume.
Lizzie, as we understand, as this humanitarian evac has been paused just for now, reportedly with the rebels in violation of the truce, in the past couple of days or so, the past 36 hours that we've been speaking, you've witnessed happiness and celebration on the streets with the liberation of many parts of Aleppo. Has the mood changed on the streets where you are?
Well, it's certainly been the quietest couple of days in Aleppo that I've seen for the many months that I've spent here over the last year or so. A few days ago, there were indeed celebrations in downtown Aleppo, many confusing those celebrations, the media kind of spinning them as celebrations, celebrating misery in Aleppo, but essentially people are celebrating hope returning, that finally more than 4 years of bloodshed will end. And that is really the sense that I'm getting from people, that they're just very frustrated, war-weary, and very desperate for this division, the bloodshed in Aleppo to end immediately.
All right, RT's Lizzie Phelan there, live in Aleppo via telephone. Thanks, Lizzie. Now, when the humanitarian operation was starting, the President of the European Council outlined the importance of protecting all civilians leaving Aleppo.
We will exert pressure on other global players who are present in Syria using all available diplomatic channels. The aim is clear: the immediate opening of humanitarian corridors to allow aid into Aleppo and for civilians to be evacuated safely under neutral international supervision. There must be full and unrestricted access for all medical personnel and aid workers. The protection of civilians is the absolute priority.
The Western governments that have been hell-bent on regime change in Syria, they've got all their cards on the table and they have to double down and say this is the fall of Aleppo. It's insanity. It's when we see the people escaping captivity and running towards the safety and the medical assistance provided by the Syrian government and even the Russian government. This is safety and this is security. They know this. This is why they're celebrating. This is why we see people dancing in the streets.
On Thursday, London hosted an international meeting of defense ministers over Syria. RT's Anastasia Cherkina was there.
Well, here in London, Russia has been accused of all evils in Syria yet again. Following a meeting of the 15 members of the anti-ISIS coalition, we saw the UK Secretary of State for Defense, Michael Fallon, as well as his US counterpart, Ash Carter, on his final goodbye tour, take more jabs at Russia. Well, we had some questions for them as well.
It was mentioned several times by Western leaders that Russia and Syria are preventing aid getting to those who need it. Is any aid currently being delivered? Has the situation changed in any way? Because we have heard from some officials in Russia saying they're waiting for this aid to come.
We've been trying to get food and medicines and other humanitarian aid into Aleppo since the summer, and we've had absolutely zero cooperation from Russia. On the contrary, we've seen aid convoys attacked, and we've seen hospitals bombed, and a barbaric attitude to the plight of civilians in Aleppo.
This rhetoric is quite different from what we've been hearing from the UN's humanitarian advisor for Syria. Let's take a listen.
We are now getting round-the-clock help from the Russian military, and we think we will be able to monitor and assist those evacuations that should follow.
There is now a new rotation of convoy getting inside eastern Aleppo to supervise the evacuation of additional wounded persons and civilians as well.
Well, and when it comes to Assad's future in Syria, we've seen today the UK and the US basically come back to where it all started.
Well, we don't see a future for President Assad in Syria, even if he defeats the opposition in Aleppo. There is no victory in bombing hospitals, in restricting humanitarian aid, and ending up in a country that you only control 40% of.
Michael's right. The political transition is the only way that the suffering of the Syrian people can finally be brought to an end.
The analysis that I have been making of what the United States is doing in the Middle East, or rather what it is not doing. It does not have a strategy. The Obama administration does not have a strategy. All it has essentially is the vested interest, the bureaucratic interests of the CIA and the Pentagon. The fact is that there is no verified reporting about any massacre in Aleppo. If something has happened, actually, I think we're going to have to wait until there is time to evaluate reports that are more precise and more reliable than we've seen so far.
So the news just in here on RT International is the mass humanitarian evac from Aleppo in Syria has now been paused due to a reported violation of the truce by the rebels. We will bring you more details the moment we get them. For now, on the program, President Barack Obama's promised to return